Welcome! We're so excited to talk to you today about setting the stage for a great day with morning routines.
We are Heidi and Emily of Second Story Window, and we just also happen to be sisters. So here you can see us as our baby teaching phases here.
These new naive teachers.
Have no idea what they're up against. But after over 20 years of teaching, we kind of have a better handle on things, and we have figured out what it takes to set the stage for an amazing day of school by intentionally planning your first moments together each day.
So that's a little about us. But who are you? If you're at this training, we can assume a few things about you. You're a teacher who cares about doing your best, starting off strong, and making a difference with your students. So we're going to help you focus that energy into fine-tuning one of the most impactful moments of your school day.
Beginnings matter. What happens before the first bell even rings has a huge impact on the outcome of the entire day. Roxanne Crete said, "The way we begin each day in our classroom sets the tone for learning and speaks volumes about what and whom we value, about our expectations for the way we'll treat each other, and about the way we believe learning occurs." The tone of the day is established in the first 20 minutes of the day. The effectiveness of the entire day is established in the first 20 minutes of the day. If mornings are a mad scramble, if your students are aimlessly filling time until class starts, you will spend the rest of the day playing catch up. Mornings like this shortchange your students, they diminish the effectiveness of everything you do, and they burn out the teachers. However, if your mornings are centered on efficient routines, if students know what to do and you have a few moments to tackle your own to-do list, the day builds a powerful momentum that will carry you through to that 3 o'clock bell. Good days start with good beginnings.
So how do you start your school day? It's a question every teacher has to answer for themselves. There's a lot to consider when you think about the first 60 minutes of a school day. And there are an endless number of activities you could choose to include in your morning routine. There's no right or wrong way to start your day. What's actually important is to purposefully select an activity that aligns with your goals. And regardless of what you choose, keep it simple enough and routine enough that it can be completed without active guidance from you. Think of everything you have to accomplish in those first 30 minutes of the day. Attendance must be submitted, lunch money collected, parent notes responded to, children welcomed and validated, permission slips collected, homework gathered, announcements listened to, lunch orders taken, take-home books exchanged, not to mention any last-minute preparations for the day's actual lessons. There's a lot to get done. And there's no single right way to tackle all of those tasks. But there is one golden rule applicable in all situations. Don't let busy time become wasted time. In order to make those first hurried minutes useful, you need to establish clear procedures. Rules, routines, and procedures are important throughout the school day, but especially first thing in the morning.
In his book, The First Days of School, Harry Wong cites a study that identified 4 characteristics of productive management. They are: students know what is expected of them and are generally successful doing it. There is relatively little wasted time, confusion, or disruption. Students are engaged in meaningful instructional activities. And the last one is the climate of the classroom is work-oriented, but relaxed and pleasant. If your classroom is running effectively, these characteristics are present in every aspect of the day, including in your classroom routines. When that happens, not only do you maximize those busy morning minutes, but you launch yourself into a positive and peaceful day. These 4 characteristics are what set the stage for beginning a successful school day.
We created a morning routines planning guide that you can use to help you decide what morning routines you need and plan how to introduce them to your class. The first thing you want to do when you're planning your morning routines is start by listing all of the things you need to get done in the morning. And don't forget to include things like running copies, playground supervision, welcoming students. List everything you do. Next, list everything you need from your students at the start of the day. A lot of these answers will depend on your school. Maybe all your kids come into the room at once, or maybe they arrive slowly over 40 minutes. Regardless of your situation, list everything that has to happen before school even starts. And if you're still enjoying summer break right now, imagine yourself as one of your students and think through everything you would do from the moment you enter school. Where do they enter your room? What do they do the minute they walk in the door? Where do they go next? Think through that step by step, and that will help you list the tasks they need to do and the tasks you need to do.
So if you remember back to those 4 characteristics from Harry Wong, here's where they're going to come into play. Use the components of a successful morning page from the download and begin sorting the tasks you've listed. Look at each item from your list of tasks and your students' lists and determine which category it meets. As a reminder, those categories are students know what is expected, there's minimal wasted time or confusion, there's meaningful instruction activities, and a focused, pleasant climate. Some tasks may be a challenge to categorize. Don't worry, there are no right or wrong answers here. No one's getting graded. For example, in my classroom, the students mark their lunch choice as soon as they enter the room. And I could list this under students know what's expected since it's a student responsibility. Or I might list it under minimized wasted time because it's a key component of effectively having attendance and lunch count submitted. Or I could list it under both headings if I'm feeling extra. Go with what feels right to you. The most important thing right now is to reflect, not to perfect. And pay special attention to any items on your list that don't fit any category. Underline, star, or circle those items. You want to make it easy for you to revisit them later.
With your task list sorted, look over your components of a successful morning page. Do you spot any holes? Maybe you don't have much listed under focus but pleasant climate. Maybe the minimal wasted time is a little sparse. The categories don't need to have an equal number of tasks. In fact, most of your list likely falls under the students know what's expected heading. But ideally, there should be at least one item in each category. Now it's time to set some goals. Start by asking yourself, what would my ideal morning look like in each of these categories? Write down your thoughts. Really imagine what those areas would look like in your classroom. Go ahead. You can pause this video and write it down. Have you included all of those tasks on your goal sheet? If not, do it now. If you have any items from your task lists that didn't fit any categories, those are the tasks you circled and starred a little while ago, let's revisit those. Think about those tasks. Do they really need to be done? Do they have to be done by you? Can you assign them to your students? Can you move them to another time of the day? Or can you eliminate them completely? It sounds radical, but sometimes you can. Now let's look at what tasks might you need to add to your morning to meet your goals. We have some questions you can ask yourself in each of these areas to determine some tasks you may want to add into your plans to meet your goals.
Let's start with students know what's expected. Here's some questions to ask yourself. Do you have a clear idea of exactly what you want students to do? They can't know what to do if you don't know what you want them to do. Do students know what to do as soon as they arrive? Do they know how to fill time before the bell? Do they understand what to do once they hear the bell? Are they successful at completing their responsibilities? As you consider these questions, see if you can identify any tasks that need to be added to your morning routines list.
Next up is minimal wasted time or confusion. Here are some questions to ask yourself. Do you organize for efficiency? Is there a place for everything? And do the students know how to access and use these spaces? What should students do if they need your help? How should they get your attention? What tasks can students take responsibility for? What tasks can students take responsibility for? Can you add to any existing classroom jobs? Can you create new jobs? Don't saddle yourself with tasks the children are capable of completing. And where did they get materials? When did they get materials? How should they get materials? Consider all of these questions and see if you've thought of any new tasks you need to add to your morning list.
Our third category to reflect on is students are engaged in meaningful instructional activities. Some questions to consider are, what can students do independently while you accomplish your morning to-do list? We can't forget how busy the teacher is at this time. What can you provide to meaningfully use the time without creating more work for yourself? How are you going to introduce this assignment to your students? And what should they do if they have questions? What should your fast finishers do when they've completed the assignment or activity? Is there a consequence for not finishing? Will you correct, collect, and or grade the activity? Use these questions to help you decide what will be meaningful work for your students in the morning. What works in one classroom isn't going to work in another classroom. You need to decide what is the best fit for you and for your students.
But just remember, the goal is not busy work, it's engaged work and also work that can happen without guidance from you. The next category and the last category is a work-focused but pleasant climate. Here are some questions to ask yourself. How will you welcome students in the morning? Will you play music as students arrive or while they work? Will you make use of a morning message? Where will students respond to that message? When will you discuss the responses? Will you use a morning meeting? Where will the meeting happen? What components will you implement? How do you recognize your students as individuals? How do you develop a classroom community? What social skills do students need to be successful in your class? How will you teach and practice those skills? And will you use meditation or other mindfulness practice? This is actually one of our favorite things to do. Consider your response to these questions and add ideas to your goal sheet. We went through those questions kind of fast, so don't be afraid to go back and watch those parts of the videos again while you fill in your sheet. By now, you should be getting a pretty good idea of what needs to occur in your class each morning.
Once you've outlined the components of a successful morning routine, you need to determine the order that the steps should be completed. Some things are obvious, like you can't correct morning work until it's completed, but some of these things are going to require some deeper thought. Should students hang up their backpacks before making their lunch choice? Do they turn in homework and lunch money at the same place? Do they get a chair or a pencil first? Are they keeping a water bottle at their desks? And if so, when do they feel that? What should your students do if they arrive before the bell rings? And what do they do if they're late? There's a lot to consider. But don't worry, because you are not married to this plan. If down the road you realize you forgot an important step or you need to rearrange steps, it's okay. It's obviously easier to teach a certain order right from the start, but don't be afraid to course correct if your routine isn't working quite right. Use our morning routine list from that download to sequence the steps in your routine. And now that you've figured out how to turn those frantic morning minutes into a streamlined masterpiece, you have to convince your students they should want that too. Basically, the morning routine is one long procedure with many, many steps. It will take days and even weeks to get everything running smoothly, but it is worth the effort. So tackle one procedure at a time until all your adorable, forgetful little students are able to complete the process automatically and accurately.
When it comes to teaching procedures, we like to use Harry Wong's method to introduce and practice those procedures. We made up an easy to remember phrase for this. It's tell, try, tally. First, explain and model the procedure. That's tell. Second, give students a chance to practice with feedback from you. That's try. Third, have students rate and reflect on how well they met your expectations. That's tally. Then practice some more till they get it right. So let's tackle one of our morning routines in action and show how we would tell, try, and tally that routine. So I'm going to start with what my students did. The first thing they did when they walked into the classroom each day, they would hang up their backpack, they would put their homework folder in the bin for their table, and they would do their lunch count. So first I would explain that procedure to them, and I would model it. I would go to the door, I would grab one of their backpacks and pretend it was mine and model going through all of those steps. You want to be as detailed as you can possibly be, and then list these steps out on the board while you're teaching this routine. I would act it out, like I just said, the right way, but I'd also act it out the wrong way. They'll love to correct you when you do it wrong, and it'll feel like you're going overboard, but that's exactly what we're going for here. Next, I'm going to give my students a chance to practice this routine with feedback from me. That's the try portion. So I would have some volunteers model how to complete this task. So I would assign the rest of the class the important job of evaluating how well they followed the directions. Give me a thumbs up if you think they remembered how to come into the classroom the right way. Give me a thumbs down if you think they forgot something. So depending on the complexity of the steps with whatever routine you're trying to teach, you might want to do the activity again with a new set of volunteers so a lot of kids get practice with this. They could follow the steps or purposefully do things the wrong way and have the class point out their mistakes. They love that. You could go either way with how you're going to have them try it out. Then it's time for the whole class to try it. My class entered my classroom from outside, so I would take them outside, line them up at the door just like they do in the morning with their backpacks on, and we're going to review the steps one last time before we go in and actually try going through all of those steps together. After they've practiced, then I'd have my students rate and reflect on how well they met my expectations. They usually catch each other's mistakes, but be sure to point out any errors if they didn't catch them. You can do this without being critical, just a simple reminder like, remember, you need to put your take-home folder in the homework folder basket. Then practice, 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 practice till they get it right. This particular routine, I bet they'd get it in one session of this, but some of these routines will take more practice than that.
And it seems like they have it in the moment, and then the next day it's like all new information.
That's so true. The best way to teach procedures is to actually teach procedures. Since a morning routine is several procedures linked together, you need to introduce each step in your morning routine specifically and individually. You should provide a formal introduction for each routine you want your students to complete. Use the 3-step lesson plan to write out exactly what you want your students to be able to do and how you're going to have them practice, tell, try, tally.
So let's talk about how this would look for the component of meaningful instructional activities in my classroom. So Emily and I had our students do a spiral review in the morning that we called morning work. That was our meaningful instructional activity. And so I have, once I trained them on how to come in and do the lunch count and all of that, we would talk about the routine of getting out their morning work. So I would have kids sit in tables, and then each table had like a drawer, one of those like plastic Sterilite drawers that had all their morning work in it. Whoever was first to the table in the morning got out their drawer for the table. So I would have to teach all of this, like who gets out the drawer, where does the drawer go on the table, how to use the board. I always used the board with the page number and what they were supposed to do and the steps in order. So they could always refer back to that if they had a question about what to do. They didn't always need me because sometimes I'm making copies.
So you're training them to be able to independently know what to do.
Absolutely. This needs to run as much as possible without hand-holding. So everything's on the board. I'm training them to reflect on the board. If in the coming days they ask me what to do next, I direct them right back to that board. So they would come in, get out the bin with the morning work, turn to the right page, work on the page. And then my fast finishers knew that they were to read from the bin of books at their table. And then at a certain time, everyone who was done would start the first learning station of the day. And then as the kids would finish, they would just make that transition. So everyone was just kind of transitioning at different times. It worked really smoothly for our morning. And all of that had to be taught. So I started by I explained it. I wrote it down in steps. We talked about where to find the answers to their questions. I acted it out. I told it in great detail. Then I would have some volunteers try it. I'd let some be the naughty kids. They loved that. And we would make sure that we could get all of those steps down. And then we would try it out as a whole class. This was a little tricky because you're wanting everyone to maybe finish a morning work page and they're not getting it all done at the same time. But we monitored and adjusted. And the good thing is they get to try it again tomorrow morning.
That is the good thing about morning routines. They'll get lots of times to practice these.
This sounds like a lot of work because it is. But the work you put in now will pay off so much greater than the effort that you're putting in. I had this morning, you get these crazy mornings. You think you're on top of it, but then everyone else has ideas of how you should spend your time. And I had an IEP scheduled for the afternoon, but then the parents showed up at 8:40. And
at what time did school start?
The first bell was 8:50, and then we had announcements and stuff. So it was usually about 9:05 before we're really going into the day. But at 8:40, they're like, you need to come down to the room because we don't think we can get this parent back. So, the school secretary, one of the secretaries in the office said she would come cover my class. And I'm like, okay. So I go down there for the IEP. We have the IEP and I'm trying to hurry out as the announcements are going. So, I wasn't there too long, but, long enough for chaos to have settled into my classroom. But as I'm walking past the office, I see that the secretary's in there. She had forgotten. She'd gotten busy. I can't blame her. The office is crazy in the mornings.
Oh, for sure.
You know how that is. And so, my kids have been unsupervised for 20 plus minutes at this point.
Oh, my gosh.
Pushing 25 minutes. And my classroom is on the far end of the school as far as possible from the room where we had the IEP. So I'm doing that run walk thing, walk quietly past the classroom door, run to the next door, walk. And it's a Monday, so the Star Spangled Banner is playing. And I've got my hand on my heart as I'm running down the hall. And as I'm going down the hall, I'm smelling this funky smell. Oh, no. Oh my gosh. And it was intense. And as I get down the hall, I realize it's coming from my classroom. But I walk in and those little angels were finishing up the pledge. They had done all this without me. The morning work was out. They were busy doing their morning work. They were finishing up the pledge. They had gotten their whole day started without me, which was awesome because once I got back to my room, I couldn't step in. I had to deal with that smell.
What was the smell?
Oh my gosh, it was so bad. So the Friday before at breakfast,
oh no,
one of my students had his backpack there because they would go from the bus to the lunchroom for breakfast. And so he had his backpack there and some kids were playing around and somehow the milk, kid's thing of milk got dumped in this kid's backpack. And it had sat over there the whole weekend. I don't know how his family didn't smell this because you could literally smell it down the hall. And so even though my classroom reeked, my kids were just keeping on. They were such good kids.
Angels.
And so we had to deal with this smell and taking this backpack outside, and it ended up in the trash because there was no way to save it. So routine is powerful.
In case that milk story didn't remind you, routine is powerful.
It can save, and that could have been a terrible day. That could have been a terrible day. That whole day could have just gone in the garbage with that terrible backpack if we hadn't had those weeks of training and practice where they just knew what to do. They could be successful and independent without me.
The routine will save you when things go awry, and they will go awry.
And that gave us the tools to just get back on track. We just picked up where we were and we just carried on.
So here are your takeaways. List and analyze your morning tasks for you and for your students. Outline your ideal morning routine according to the 4 characteristics and determine what the efficient order will look like for your classroom. And then plan how you will clearly teach, try, and tally the steps until your students can do them independently. And remember, you can refer back to this video, and the free handout that we have for you will walk you through all of these steps because you will likely have some questions later as you get started on this.
Like we said at the beginning of this training, beginnings matter. If you remember that Roxanne Crete quote I read, the way we begin each day in our classroom sets the tone for learning and speaks volumes about what and whom we value, about our expectations for the way we will treat each other, and about the way we believe learning occurs. We hope that the steps that we've shared have helped you see your mornings in a new way and to help you see some of the possibilities of what your mornings could be like. We're confident that if you spend some time intentionally planning your morning routines, teaching them explicitly, and then adjusting them as needed, you will see benefits in all aspects of your day in this coming school year. You have the tools you need to launch each day in a meaningful and effortless way.
We can't wait to hear all about your success stories as you set up your morning routines this year. And we also want to hear how you're able to deal with those mornings with milky backpacks and all other crazy things that you will encounter this year. But we know you are ready to tackle it. Good luck this year. We're excited for you.
Thank you.